Elena Voss, 34, stood by the massive glass window of the corporate high-rise, her posture precise, commanding. Olive skin glowed under the pale morning sun, her sharp cheekbones accentuated by the subtle contour of her makeup. Chestnut hair perfectly tied in a sleek bun. The city buzzed below like ants. Oblivious to the brewing storm inside the boardroom, she owned. Not literally, but an influence. She had built the company from scratch, acquiring every license, every operating permit herself, until her name on the sole operating license became untouchable. And yet, here she was, summoned by the board, the same people who had watched her climb from nothing, ready to fire her. The elevator doors opened, and she entered the boardroom, the polished oak reflecting her tall, lithe frame. The room smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fear. Chair by chair, the board members shifted, whispering behind hands. Their target, Elena. Their weapon, supposed, redundancy. But they hadn't realized her foresight. "Good morning, Elena," said Martin Gray, CFO, the man whose bland smile barely concealed ambition. "We've decided, for the sake of restructuring, that your position—" He hesitated. Elena's gaze didn't flinch. Her hazel eyes narrowed, sharp and assessing. "Spare me the theatrics," she said, voice smooth but cutting, like a scalpel. "I'm aware of your plan." A flicker of panic crossed their faces. Elena moved toward the digital display behind the head of the table, where her name was literally on the certificate of sole operation. "You can terminate my role all you want, but without me, the license, and therefore the company's legal operation, goes dark. So, technically," she smiled, faintly menacing, "you fire me, and you're out of business." Whispers erupted. Martin's face tightened. "That's illegal, Elena." "On the contrary," she said, leaning forward, the sharp angles of her jaw catching the light. "It's entirely legal. All documents are in order. I've played by the rules, better than anyone here ever did." For a moment, silence filled the room. Elena could feel the power shift subtly, like the current under a calm surface. She had been patient, observing every weakness, every whispered insult, every strategic misstep. And now they were exposed. "Then what do you want?" demanded Rachel Lim, VP, tapping her manicured nails impatiently. "I want transparency," Elena replied. Her voice was calm, almost sweet, but underneath it lay ice. "And I want control. Or we can renegotiate your positions once you realize I am indispensable." It was a delicate chess game. Every breath, every movement, calculated. Elena's hand brushed the table, the sharp rings on her fingers catching the light, a subtle reminder of the stakes. By the time she left the boardroom, her heels clicking a rhythm of inevitability on the marble floor, Elena had already begun crafting the next stage of her plan. Emails to allies, financial adjustments, subtle manipulations, all invisible yet catastrophic. Each step ensured that if they tried to cut her out, the repercussions would spiral uncontrollably. Outside, the city continued unaware, but inside the walls of the company, a silent war had begun. Elena Voss was no longer just the employee. They were pawns in her carefully twisted game. And the game had only just begun. Elena Voss returned to her private office, the city skyline behind her forming a jagged silhouette of opportunity and danger. She loosened her bun, letting chestnut waves fall around her shoulders, the softness contrasting the sharpness in her hazel eyes. Today wasn't just about defense. It was about offensive strategy. Her fingers flew over her laptop, executing a sequence of automated triggers she had prepared months ago. Certain contracts, certain accounts, even emails, the slightest touch could create chaos for anyone attempting to oust her. She leaned back in her chair, black leather embracing her like armor, a smirk curling at the corner of her lips. Just then her assistant, Marla, knocked softly. Marla, petite, with sharp blue eyes and hair pulled into a practical ponytail, knew Elena's rules: never interrupt unless it's life or death. Elena, the board is reconvening. They're planning something. Elena's gaze sharpened. Good, let them try. She stood, towering over Marla, her slim, toned figure radiating authority. They'll see that underestimating me is their fatal mistake. In the boardroom, whispers had escalated into outright plotting. Martin Gray, flustered but determined, laid out a plan to bypass Elena's authority. If we restructure quickly, she won't have time to interfere, he argued. Elena entered unannounced, her presence like a steel blade slicing through tension. The room went silent. Her olive, toned skin glimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights, her tailored navy suit accentuating her power. I've heard your plan, she said, each word deliberate. Cute. But here's the twist. I've anticipated every one of your moves. A laptop pinned. Elena's subtle arranged emails had alerted legal, external auditors, and key shareholders. Panic replaced arrogance. Rachel Lim's polished nails tapped furiously on the table. This isn't possible, she muttered. Elena moved slowly, deliberately, circling the table like a predator. Everything you thought you controlled, you don't. You wanted me gone, yet you are powerless. You cannot operate this company without me, and every second you delay makes it worse. Martine's voice shook. This is extortion. She laughed lightly, the sound both melodic and chilling. No, Martin, it's foresight, planning, skill. You call it extortion because you're losing, and losing is painful for amateurs. By the day's end, Elena had not just neutralized their plans, she had turned the tables. Subtle financial diversions, legal contingencies, and public shareholder nudges created fractures among the board members. They were fighting not only her power, but their own greed. Elena's reflection in the glass showed her poised, untouchable. The calm before the storm. And she knew the storm wasn't for them. It was coming for anyone who underestimated her cunning. As the lights of the city flickered on, Elena smiled. She didn't just survive the board's trap. She was already several steps ahead, weaving a web they wouldn't escape. Elena had moved beyond defense. The hunt had begun. She navigated the underground networks of corporate intelligence, using her elegance and charm to extract secrets. Her hazel eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. Her tailored black coat hugged her slender frame as she stepped into dimly lit bars and conference rooms, places where whispers held more power than contracts. Each board member had a weakness, a flaw she could exploit. Martin Gray's desperation for recognition made him predictable. Rachel Lim's obsession with appearances left her vulnerable to manipulation. Elena deployed every subtle psychological tactic she had mastered, turning their arrogance into their undoing. Inside the office late at night, she analyzed emails, internal audits, and phone records. Her fingertips, adorned with silver rings, glided across encrypted files. Elena was unstoppable, her intellect sharp as the diamonds she wore, her movements precise. She was an enigma, a storm in human form. A sudden knock startled her. It was Marla. Elena, they've hired outside consultants. They're trying to override the license legally. Elena smiled faintly. Predictable. But they forget one key detail. She rose, the silhouette of her long coat flickering in the light, casting elongated shadows across the room. I wrote the clauses. Every loophole. They cannot touch me without destroying themselves. The next day, the board tried to force her hand. Elena entered calmly, her olive skin glowing under the office lights, every movement deliberate. She presented a meticulously prepared twist. A hidden clause revealing that any attempt to bypass her authority would trigger automatic audits, freezes, and shareholder intervention. The room froze. Elena's voice cut through like steel. Try me, and watch as your careers implode. One misstep, and you'll be legally exposed for negligence, fraud, and more. By the end of the week, the board was fractured. Alliances shifted, rumors circulated, and fear of Elena's strategic brilliance became palpable. She didn't just hold the license, she held their fates. Her reflection in the darkened window showed her confident, poised, and untouchable. Elena Voss wasn't just a woman who survived betrayal, she was the architect of revenge, orchestrating a corporate symphony that none could resist. Elena stood atop the skyscraper, wind teasing her hair, city lights reflecting off her sharp features. The board had made one final attempt, a bold move to revoke her control through public pressure. Elena's hazel eyes glittered with anticipation. She had prepared for this. Through subtle leaks, insider revelations, and perfectly timed press releases, she turned the public narrative. The board's credibility crumbled. Every investor, every shareholder, every media outlet saw the truth. Elena was indispensable. Elena's steps echoed in the empty office as she finalized the last contingency plan. Her toned frame moved with grace, her mind racing ahead of every possible move. She smiled, a small, knowing curve of lips that spelled doom for those who tried to topple her. When the board finally conceded, Elena entered the room one last time. The smell of fear was thick. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said softly, every eye on her, "the game is over. You played without understanding the rules." By midnight, Elena had secured full authority. Her power wasn't just legal, it was psychological. She controlled not only the license, but the narrative, the company, and the people who dared challenge her. Alone in her office, she leaned back, her reflection a perfect mirror of strength and cunning. Elena Voss had survived the ultimate betrayal and had turned it into the ultimate triumph. The company was hers, the board powerless, and her reputation untouchable. Outside, the city thrummed with life, oblivious to the silent war waged in glass towers. Elena smiled. She didn't just win, she had rewritten the rules entirely. And anyone who tried to cross her next would find themselves trapped in the twisted brilliance of her mind.